Hello, everybody. Bienvenidos, bienvenidas, bienvenides. I am here with the wonderful and fabulous Catalina Nieto, who is going to be co-facilitating tonight's session. Tonight is our fifth and final of the CPC Online Language Justice Interpreter training sessions. I am a little bit excited to have my Wednesday evenings to do whatever the heck I want. And I'm also a little bit sad. And I'm going to miss you all. I'm like, we can talk about this, we can talk about that. We haven't talked about this. But I want to, this is the first time that CPC has done something like this, like an online training. A ton of people applied, and I can think of no better group of people to try out this little experiment than with all of y'all. So I want to start off with saying some thank yous. So I'm going to be a little sad at the end. We are going to do some quick intros. This afternoon, I was texting you all to think about your favorite words. They can be in Hindi, in Kinyarwanda, in Nepali, in Spanish, in English. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to go around old school, calling you all in alphabetical order, if I can do it. And if you'll say your name, your pronouns, your favorite word right now, and then how you would translate that. How would you translate your favorite word? Listo? So Ada, I'll go first. I'm Ada. I use she, her, ella pronouns. My current favorite word in Spanish is ojalá, which I would interpret as hopefully. But I love that it comes from the Arabic inshallah or God willing. I love that connection to see that. So I'm gonna call on Ana Baranda and we'll take it from there. We're saying name, pronouns, favorite word, and translation.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ana Baranda. I use she, her, ella pronouns, and the word of the day for me is, it's in English, fellowship. And I like the translation in Spanish, compañerismo, but I think the general sense of fellowship that I get is communion or general communion with your neighbor.
And Anna Pfaff?
I like words that are reflexive in Spanish. So Anna, she, her, hers. Reflexive verbs I like because we don't have them in English. So like madrugarse, to wake up early, or anything that is reflexive because we don't have it in English.
I think Amanda Cherry is next. Go ahead, Amanda.
My name is Amanda. My pronouns are she, hers. And I can never, when someone asks me what my favorite word is, I can never think of one, but my partner's favorite word in English is squirrel. He thinks that's funny, which, Anyway, so I'm borrowing his word for today, saying squirrel, because it's fun to say.
And how would you translate it?
Ardilla.
I already messed up. Ahmed, do you want to go?
You're on mute. Oh, you have to unmute.
See. Hold on. I'm trying to see if Ahmed will go. Okay, I'm going to skip. I'm going to get this all wrong. Don't judge me, everybody. I think Catalina. No, Carolina. Carolina Siliceo is going to go next. Oh, no, there's Aime. There's Aime.
My name is Emme. Pronoun is he, his. And my favorite word is introvert. That means umuntu ugira isoni mu Kinyarwanda. In Kinyarwanda. That's all. Thank you.
Carolina Siliceo.
So I text Ada the word metanoia, which I've looked for a translation before and haven't been very successful, so I'm going to assume it's metanoia. And it's just a really philosophical word for transformation and change. So if I ever got a tattoo with one word, that would probably be it.
Ahora sí, Catalina.
Hi everyone, my name is Catalina. I go by she and her, ella. And one of my favorite words right now is cosmovisión. I've heard it said like cosmovision. It's kind of like a person's worldview or a people's worldview in a way, but I've heard it said also as cosmovision in English, cosmovisión in Spanish.
Eileen.
Hi, I'm Eileen. She, her, ella. And one of my favorite words, and I use it a lot because it's a very flexible word and it's not a curse word, but it's almost, and it feels like it. Chingao. I love that word. And I hadn't really thought about how to, what the word it would be in English because it's so many things, but maybe an approximation would be like, damn. But it's better than damn. But that's what I can think of.
Like it's like that, but better. Listo. Gabriel.
Hola, I'm Gabriel, pronouns they, them, ella. Y'all, Puerto Ricans have a lot of really interesting words. I'm gonna break the rules a little bit, mostly because for my first word, which I heard on Radio Ambulante, the word is arreconchumate. And I have no fucking clue what that word means, but I did hear it on a podcast, so it must exist. In fact, the first time I searched it, I couldn't find the word because I was missing an R. But my word is a word my mom taught me when I was growing up, and it's piriguivi. And the word is turkey. I know, Ada. I love your reaction.
I love it. Genesis.
So I had sent to Ala cochinita and imapis. And now I'm just here sitting like, is it? And I'm like, yeah, like, so I've been kind of obsessed with the word cochinito and cochinita, in part because cochinito brings like memories from my childhood because it was like, you know, the sweetbread, el cochinito, el marranito, like all of that. But then I've also been kind of trying to learn how to do cochinita pibil. So I think I just been on like a culinary, like trying to figure out words or just trying to like really connect to the words that I have heard from my childhood regarding culinary stuff. Yeah, and like once I figure out a recipe, I'll send it. I'll send it to the group.
Gina.
Hi, my name is Joaquina or Gina. She, her, ella, and my word is échale. So like the exact translation, I'm not sure, but like I picked the word because like my mom like is my biggest cheerleader. So siempre she's always like échale ganas or échale producto de gallina, you know, like keep going, like. And so I guess how I would interpret it, it'd be like to keep going. I don't think there's like really a literal translation.
Juan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi there. I'm Juan Sanchez. I go by he, his, and I was thinking in relámpago, and it's just that the accent in Spanish that is special, and it's also somehow the word makes you think or makes me think about that relámpago, and I guess will be lightning. And I learned years ago that is related with is said in a Mayan language kakulha, and there's a story with that, but it's yeah, it's good. I like it.
Maria?
Hello, everybody. I'm Maria Garcia. I go by she, her, ella. And the favorite word that I could think of today is reinvent, which I believe in the translation is reinventarse. It doesn't matter how many times you can mess up, you can always flip it again.
Mónica?
So Spanish, apiadarse, I was gonna say is like one that popped up in my mind, which at the moment like I couldn't remember what the heck it meant. So it's like to take pity on or mercy. And in English, rambunctious, but I don't know what this. I guess you would just say they're being too loud or something. Sorry, I know we were only supposed to have one.
No, look. Natalie, do you want to share, introduce yourself, share your favorite word and the translation?
Yeah, hi, I'm Natalie. I use she, her, and ella pronouns. And my favorite word right now is cachai, which is a Chilean word that's like can translate roughly to like you know or you get it. Do you get it? I really like it. I it's also like really hard when I'm speaking in Spanish with folks that are not Chilean because they're like, "What did you even say?" And that's why I like it.
Look at the other Chilena. Look at the other Chilena on the call. They're like cracking up. Listo, Pravina, do you want to share your word?
Hello everyone, I'm Pravina Lakshmanan. I go with the pronoun she, hers. So it's very difficult, as someone else said, it's very difficult for me to pick a favorite word, but I think it's the time and the phase that I am in. So right now I'm doing a lot of my dissertation proposal writing. So I was just going through my Word document and I think I used, I'm using a lot, I'm using the word intersection a lot. And I think I'm using that even outside of academic writing in my daily conversation because I find everyone talking with these monolithic ideas, so to kind of interject them, like that's been a word that I'm using very often. I have used that in the little interpretation that I do with undocumented immigrants as well, but in Hindi, but there's no exact word for intersection in the context that I mean, but a word that most individuals who speak Hindi understand is choraha, which means crossroads. So it represents intersection, but it's not exactly intersection in the context that I mean. Thank you.
Thanks. Stephanie?
Hello, she, her, hers. I'm Stephanie. And the word that I have, I don't know, like I'm gonna just say it, but it's carajo. It's a word that I heard growing up. I just really love it. and like the way that it feels in your mouth too, like just carajo. And also like depending on like what country you're from, it has like a more severity than another. So my father was from Costa Rica and my mother is from Ecuador. So like just using it, I love it. But yeah, I think it translates to like, oh shit, if I'm like I'm pretty sure, but yeah, that's my word.
Listo. ¿Y Selva?
Now, yes, now. Hi, everybody. My name is Selva. I use she, her, ella. And my word, because of its meaning more than its sound, but I also like its sound. It's fierce, and it translates somewhat into feroz, ferocidad, feroz, fierce.
And we skipped over Brenda, but Brenda, do you want to introduce yourself? Pronouns, favorite word, and translation?
Yep. My name is Brenda. I go by she, hers, ella, and my favorite, it's a compound word used as an expression. I am from Cali, Colombia, so we always say mira, ve, which literally translates into look, see, which means nothing, but it's like, hey. So we are very redundant in that, but that's my identity, mira, ve.
I think that's everybody, right? Awesome. So we have a very special guest today, my dear friend Catalina Nieto, who's co-facilitating today's session, and I'm going to let Cata introduce herself and then introduce the first activity that we're going to do today. But before that, I want to say that today's session is going to continue the conversation of interpreter role and ethics that we had talked about last time. And it's also going to be a time to like bring it all together. So bring the last 5 weeks together. That's our hope. Entonces, se lo paso a Cata. Take it away.
Thank you. Hey, everyone. Really great to be here with you all. Thank you, Ada, for the invite. Catalina, I'm originally from Colombia. I see there's some Colombians in the call. I basically lived half of my life in Colombia, the other half here in the US, and been interpreting for on and off like 7 years, but at least the last 3 or so I've been a freelance interpreter and trainer. I learned from a curriculum that was started at the Highlander Center for Popular Education, and my mentor, one of my mentors, Roberto, Ada, many folks. Actually, my first training, Ada was my trainer. So yeah, and just been dedicating my life to language justice. So really love this work. So we wanted to basically jump on and do some practice of interpretation. Everyone's gonna get a chance to practice. This is how it's gonna work. And it'll be really a chance for you to kind of put into practice the many different things that you've been learning the past few weeks. So the way we're gonna do it is that me and Ada are gonna have a conversation in English, and then all of you are gonna be interpreting simultaneously into another language, whichever other language of your choice that you usually interpret into. And then you'll be on mute, everyone will be on mute. So basically you're kind of like pretending you have a transmitter, a little mic. Just make sure you use kind of like a soft voice, because that's normally how we interpret. It's kind of like in a soft voice into the mic, but not whisper, but just kind of like a softer voice. And we know like it'll be kind of like interpreting into the air, or maybe there's someone around you, they might hear you, but we know that it not necessarily about someone else hearing your interpretation, but more to kind of get into the practice of it. So as we start the conversation, you're gonna start kind of like simultaneously following, interpreting the conversation. Do the best that you can. If you feel like you're like losing it or missing words, just take a deep breath and keep at it, you know, just do your best. And then after a few minutes, we'll kind of like bring it to a close, and we'll get a chance to just check in and see how it went. Is that clear? Any clarification questions? So let me just model it real quick with Ada, although you all will be in mute, but so we're modeling right now. I'm gonna start talking about a recent experience that I had, and as you can see, Ada is simultaneously
Ada está interpretando simultáneamente.
Yeah? Sounds good? Okay, let's do a quick trial run with everyone, and then we'll take it from there. Take a deep breath. Practice, practice, practice. All right. So I'm gonna start. This is when you can start interpreting to yourself. So I should see little mouths moving right now. My name is Catalina Nieto. This is the first trial run of our simultaneous interpretation practice. You should be interpreting into another language everything that I'm saying right now. Okay, that's the trial. Yes? Got it? All right, let's go. All right. Ada, I hear that you've had some interesting interpretation experiences lately.
Yes.
I would love to hear more about those. Would you like to share one or two of them?
Yeah. It's been a little bit, but when I was thinking about like a recent challenging interpreting experience, about a year ago, Immigration and Customs Enforcement did a raid here in Asheville, North Carolina. It's about the 4th or 5th time that ICE has been in Asheville in this kind of activity. I mean, there's been all kinds of activity, but in this kind of like over 10, 20 people arrested. It's super traumatic. It's super traumatic for the people who are arrested, for their families and friends, for other immigrants, for people who have been previously detained or are afraid of getting detained, for the organizers who are responding. Like, it's a very traumatic thing. And I had been interpreting at a lot of the planning meetings with the affected families, protests, vigils, church events. And so it was time to interpret a kind of like, this was like weeks after the raid, and it was kind of like organizers and first responders come together to debrief what worked, what didn't work. I'm sitting there. One of our compas comes in. Everyone's like, yay! He comes in and he's pissed. He's pissed. He's like, I'm not going to sit down. I'm here to tell you all, fuck this, fuck that, fuck you. This was wrong. This was wrong. I was insulted when you did this. I was insulted that this was, and this is a person that had done a ton of work and super important work to make sure that families were getting fed. This is a person who had like been there day after day after day. And in that moment, I remember making like the conscious decision. I'm here to interpret. I'm not here to, the people that were there, I'm very close to. It's not time for me to feel, I can see my friends are about to cry. It's not a time for me to like show compassion for my friends. It's not a time for me to think about, why is he mad? He shouldn't be mad. It's not a time for me to think about like, actually he's right. No, I remember specifically like turning it all off, focusing and thinking the best thing I need to do right now is interpret. And if everyone's being told to go fuck themselves, they need to know exactly how they're being told to fuck themselves. And if everyone's being sent to hell, they need to know exactly how they're being sent to hell. And so and this has happened to me more recently, where I just need to like shut it all off and focus. Cata, you just went on a trip to Guatemala. I'm sure you have exciting stories. Do you want to share one?
I would love to. Thank you for sharing. So yeah, I recently went on a 2-week interpretation gig, and it was amazing. It was a group of women, of gender nonconforming people, both activists from the US, mostly people of color, Black folks, and Mesoamerica activists. So there were also people that identify as transgender women, with also some that are non-binary. Mesoamerica activists have been also very much reclaiming and making sure that they are seen as women. So it was a really interesting group and really beautiful sharing and exchange. So I was part of the interpretation team and coordinating or co-coordinating. We had some interesting conversations as the interpretation team in terms of how people identify themselves in terms of gender. We knew that there were situations where, for example, a trans woman, he was sharing and someone misgendered this person. So what do we do as interpreters? Do we interpret the misgendered word, or do we change it knowing that they don't identify as that? And we very quickly realized that even though we know this person was misgendered, we have to interpret it as it was said, and the group itself will need to decide what they're gonna do with that. Someone's gonna call it out, someone's gonna interrupt, or they might not do anything. But it's not up to us to decide as interpreters. It'll be the group, as long as they have all the information. So that was one thing. The other thing, there were many lessons learned, but there was another moment when we went to a site visit. And there's a lot of reclaiming of land and space there. And we went to a memorial, and we were going to have 3 languages, Cachiquel, Spanish, English. And we made a really amazing plan. We were going to have interpretation from Cachiquel into Spanish in one channel. And then the Spanish speakers will hear into Spanish in that channel. And then also interpreters were going to wear equipment to hear the interpretation and then interpret from the interpretation into Spanish into English. This is called relay interpretation. It was awesome. The plan was perfect. We get there, it's total chaos. Some people didn't receive their equipment in the bus. Some people did. It was too late to give equipment. As a Mayan ceremony starts, you cannot interrupt those ceremonies. There's no way. The Cachiquel interpreter had never used interpretation equipment. They said that they did not want to use interpretation equipment, that they do only consecutive. So different decisions were made. We decided that, okay, the Cachiquel interpreter is only going to do consecutive. The whole ceremony started. There's no way that she can actually go into the ceremony to start interpreting. So another decision was made to have the Cachiquel interpret into the ear of the Spanish-English interpreter, hear the Spanish, and interpret into English through one channel. Most of the ceremonies happening in Cachiquel, some of it in Spanish. Then I realized that this is happening, and I'm like, wait a moment. Like, we have a whole group of Mesoamerican activists that don't understand Cachiquel and don't understand English, and they are not getting interpretation because we don't have a channel for Spanish from Cachiquel into Spanish. So we just left an entire group of people out of this communication. It was really hard to be in that moment and to realize the consequences of different decisions that were made we had a whole debrief. It was a huge learning moment that to this day I'm still processing. So yeah, lots of learning for sure, even after years and years of doing this work, and this happened.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, and action, or no, close.
So another deep breath. Breathing out. Tell me about the recovery techniques. What recovery techniques do you think that you used? Specifically, expansion, contraction, definition. Stephanie, go for it.
I felt that I was using expansion, but then when I was using it, I felt like I was taking too much time expanding on words that I forgot, that I like lost track of the sentence. And so then I was like trying to catch up. But then there was a word that I couldn't, and I was like, oh, let me expand on this. And then I was like, okay. So it was like a lot of catch up, but then trying to get it. So.
Anyone else? Another recovery technique that they noticed using? Maria.
Well, I don't know if this one is definition, but when you mentioned the indigenous language, I had no idea how to pronounce it. So I just said indigenous language or native language. Yeah. I think that's one is definition, but to be confirmed.
Yeah. What about with the queering language? What did y'all use for gender non-conforming? Who wants to share what they said for gender non-conforming? Everyone skipped it. Genesis, go for it.
So I used género no conforme, or which was like género no conforme. That's what tends to always stick out for me, but I know it's because we talked about it from the training that you had hosted here in Houston. So that was like one of my questions while there. So I think it's like now programmed in me to always be like género no conforme or género no binario. Or
yeah. What about straight? What did people say for straight? Kata, did you say straight?
I think I ended up not using that word.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, something? So I did something on purpose, which was really hard. I misgendered someone when I was talking. And the other thing was that I referred to the group as they're folks that are gender nonconforming, also women. I'm wondering, how did you use the plural if you were interpreting into Spanish? But I don't know if, because the plural is usually, did you use ellas, basically?
Can you remember? Hold on. Yeah, because I caught it. I caught it when you misgendered, and I was like, "Gata," and then I was like, "Pinche gata." It's like she's tricking me. Yeah. So what did you do? Because we talked about this last week, right? Like, the message is wrong, or you think the message is wrong, or you're assuming the message is wrong. So what did people do there if they caught it?
That got me all off track, honestly, because I was like, flowing, and then I was like, I heard he, and I was like, wait, the only difference between he and she is one letter, so did I just not hear it? And then I was like, did I hear it? And then I was like, wait, is this a test? And then 3 sentences later, I was like, oh yeah, I'm interpreting. And then, so like, I heard it, but I didn't know if I'd heard it, because you were talking about women and gender nonconforming folks and like transness and queerness. And so I was like, I must have not heard it. Like it must have been something cracked in the connection between us through online.
And what about cuss words? That was, what about cuss words? What did folks do with the cuss words? I can see your smiles, I know. Anyone want to share what they did with it? Pravina, go for it.
I basically didn't use the word. It didn't use the word, but I said the person used a word that he was not supposed to. So so that's what I did. So in Hindi, when I was translating, I basically said, like gandi word bata raha tha. So basically I was saying that it's a word that people don't use normally. It's a non-usable word, something like that. So I didn't use that word.
And had you been interpreting in first person and then you switched into third?
No, so no, I found myself interpreting, saying that in third person, not in first person at all. So
Pravina, remember first person.
Person, yeah. Now that I think, yeah.
Even if they're cussing, first person.
Yes.
Elba, do you want to go for it?
¿Me escuchan? Sí. Fuck, nunca sé qué decir con fuck.
Will you say it in English?
Right now? Yes, that's right. Sorry. That when I hear fuck and I need to interpret that, I don't know what to say, so I just use a strong bad word, but that it's not the literal bad word. So I usually say mierda, just because it's one that like I know people recognize as a bad word. It's somewhat strong, but like fuck has like such a sexual connotation that there's like something about like saying a bunch of like fuck in a space, or like you don't know, like, so that got to me where I was like, oh, I don't know what to say about this. So I turned it into a bad word, but not a literal word, or not a sexual word.
That Puerto Ricans really like to cuss. So I was like, que se joda todo esto, que se jodan ustedes, jódense. Like, I was just like, man, every conjugation of joder was the one that I used. Because it was the first one that came to mind. I was like, yeah, this is like a very, it just felt like the right word for this moment.
Yeah, that's great. I'll just, Carolina, and then we'll move on.
So I started with mierda, and then as he continued to cuss everybody out, was like, y los mando toda la chingada, like, todos mando la chingada. Like, I was like, oh, this is not stopping. So the message is that he just told everybody to go, you know.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think I tried to convey that.
I just learned this term of buffering, going back to what Selva said. And it said that in like some study, women interpreters use more buffering, and that's when you soften the blow. And you're like, mierda, shit. Like, it's not fucking anymore. No, it's just shit. Like, so I think it's an interesting thing just to notice that we're like, oh no. But I mean, if he's in there, I mean, he was in there yelling, y'all. He's standing up, just yelling at us. So if you're listening to like, shit this, shit that, you're like, he is madder than shit, mad. Kata, did you want to add something?
Yeah, it also makes me think of why do we want to soften the blow? Like, if I was mad at someone and I was cussing them out, and then I find out someone is totally like way like lessening what I'm saying, like, how would that feel? You know, and like just questions for us to explore. Like, why does it feel like we have to soften it if clearly, you know, like, what if they do want to get in it and fight it out or whatever? So just, you know, things to keep in mind.
So last time we focused on the mic, right? And right now our conversations are about the mic. And I want us to today spend a little bit of time to think about like the other choices that you make, because you're not just making choices here, right? You're not just making pronoun choices. You're not just making bad word choices. Like, you're also making other choices, right? Where do I stand? Who do I look at? What do I look at? How often am I going to pass this microphone? How early did I show up to the gig? What is my analysis? Have I done my research on Mayan ceremonies? Like, there's so much more that goes on that's not just on the mic. And so we're going to do this activity that we think about as spheres of influence.
Yes. Yeah, so this is in a way to like make us think of so that we can be focused in interpreting in the moment that we're interpreting. And we know that in that moment, all the world problems will not be solved and will not be all dependent on us, right? Like we know that someone's fighting a deportation case in a way, they won't. Like it's not really all dependent on us, right? Even though it feels like that when we're interpreting, like knowing that there's so many other things that play and so many other things through this lens of interpretation that we can do before, after we show up to interpret. So we have this, I don't know if you could see it. It's like a graph that talks about spheres of influence. So this is the first one. The first sphere is like when we are actually interpreting, where we are there interpreting the choices we make. What can we do to just be the best interpreters possible? Then here's another sphere of influence, which is the immediate environment. So basically when you're in the office, like before you walk into the doctor's office or the community event, or after, kind of like the immediate environment of where you're interpreting. Then there's another one that is community. So at a community level, with this lens of interpretation, what are some things that you can have influence in your community to make sure that, I don't know, there's trained interpreters or other things that can happen at that level. And then there's another sphere of influence here is global. So like a larger level with this interpretation lens that we have now, how could we also think about different ways in which we can have influence here. So what we're gonna do, Ada, you're gonna explain the scenario and then you're on mute.
So what we're going to do is that think about the story that Cata told, okay? You're in Guatemala, you've been there for 12 days, you're interpreting, you just rode a bus, you get to this place, you had a plan, and the plan just went to shit. And there are these decisions that are being made, right? Like there's this interpreter who doesn't want to use the microphone. There's a group of people who is missing the message. So we're going to split you out into small groups. And we're going to ask you to think about, like, what could Cata have done in the immediate environment before this happened? What could Cata have done an hour, 2 hours, in that moment? What are some of the things that Cata could have done in the immediate environment? As an organization, like the group who hired her, let's say, or the group that she's with, what could the group have done before this moment? As a community, what are some of the things that the folks on this delegation could have done? And then like dreaming big, like in the world, what are some of the things that could have been done to avoid that moment and those people missing out the message? Does that make sense?
I just realized I missed one here. So it's on the mic, immediate environment. This would be organization, then community, then global.
Listo. So you're going to have a couple of minutes to think about, like, what could Cata have done? See, are there any questions? Okay, off you go, and we'll see you in a couple of minutes. So think about immediate environment, organization, community, global.
All right, looks like everyone's back, yeah? Okay, so maybe let's hear from one of the groups, AME, the group that was with AME. What were some of the things that you put for immediate environment?
The group has said that when there is some help for the organization, the group should invite an interpreter, but I didn't get it well, but I was thinking that when someone needs help from interpreter, they just invite them as a group, and then if they need help, they should first communicate with organization and say that if they need interpreter or if they don't need him or her. So I think there should be communication between the community group members and the community and interpreter himself, so that the interpretation should be well organized or given to someone who is in need of interpretation in good way.
Okay, so I'm hearing like there's clear communication between community, organization, and interpreters, kind of like clear communication of needs and all of that. Great, yes. And maybe sometimes this communication needs to be in the multiple languages itself, right? Okay, let's hear from another group, Natalie's group. Natalie, what were some things that you put for organization, the sphere of influence of organizationally?
I don't know if my other teams want to share since they got to speak. I didn't speak much, but we seemed a little confused about we spent some time trying to just clarify the scenario and the things that I heard. I don't know if it was necessarily organizationally, but some folks spoke about like making decisions around the language to translate when the equipment hadn't worked, and someone said that that if they had to make a choice, that they wouldn't have translated it to the English speaking folks. They would have made the choice to translate it only to the Spanish speaking folks. Another person said that like because there was a hesitation to use the equipment by the folks doing the ceremony, that they would have made a decision to not translate at all, because the more important thing was to keep the ceremony going in a way that folks were comfortable with. I don't know if any of my teammates want to make a comment about the organizational piece.
I think like as like the communication between the organizations, we talked very briefly about just having like a way to check in about equipment and the level of comfort that maybe had they been exposed to it, and so like we just discussed that more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All important things to think about. Or like, could you have done a little training before with the interpreter? Things like that, yeah. Okay, let's hear from the group with Gina, another group. Let's hear anything that you put on the community sphere at a community level.
Okay, so we talked about a few things. I felt like time went by really fast. But Brenda brought up the fact about like we really didn't assign to the categories either. So but she brought up the fact about like possibly like as an organization, they should have ideally had a pre-run, or a practice of, what could happen, like certain scenarios. The other part mentioned, well, the part that I mentioned was like, if there would have been time to interact with the monolingual folks and like somehow create community, I know that I like con tiempo, with time, and like, when things are going astray, like it's hard to do it, but like I know I've been at gigs where we connect one-on-one with the members that are monolingual speakers, and they feel invested to take care of the equipment. So making sure that they, like if they're going on a trip and you're going on the bus, at least someone on the bus is aware of the equipment. You know what I'm saying? Like, so yeah, I don't know if the other members want to say something.
I wanted to point out how it could have how lack of sensitivity to culture could have played a part in there, because if we're talking about a ceremony, then that just preparing for how sacred that was for that culture, and to making sure that plan B could be something to okay, let's stop interpretation and honor the ceremony as it is, because what does it mean for people and to people.
And then let's hear from the last group, Stephanie, if you put anything on global or any of the others.
I think that one of our other group members can speak on that, because they were actually mentioning something before we were cut off, and I forgot their name, and I'm trying to look through. Oh, Gabrielle, yeah. If you want to speak more on that.
The only thing I could think of for global was, and I don't know if I'm interpreting this correctly, haha, pun intended, but I had the idea of what kind of research needed to be done ahead of time to know how to properly interpret for the ceremony. So it's like, did we know that no electronic equipment was going to be used? If so, we could have developed another plan. That was the only thing I thought of. It's not anything too profound. Sorry.
So the reason that we wanted to do this activity is because a lot of times folks feel like, okay, so I went to this training and Ada told me, or Kata told me, or Andrea told me, just to interpret, right? Like I just need to interpret what's being said, and that's all I can do. And I think that we do this activity so that, just to show that there's so many other things that you're gonna have to do. Sometimes you wanna do them, sometimes you really wanna do them, sometimes you don't wanna do them at all. But there's all kinds of things that you can do. So interpreting, we had talked about how it's not just word choice, right? It's also not just interpreting. Like you're handing out equipment, you're making decisions. Who's gonna be included? Who's gonna be excluded? Why am I making this decision? I'm just the interpreter. Someone else should be making this decision. So it's just an exercise to practice before a gig, a week before the gig, a year before the gig, 20 years before the gig. What are some of the things that could be in place to avoid the moment where I'm like, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to say this word and that's going to fix all of the world's injustices. No, right? It takes all kinds of work. And we would encourage you to do that work so that you're not trying to fix things when you have a microphone or when you're in a room with folks. See? So last time, Golden and I had said, the only thing we know about interpreting is that it's in the first person, and everything else is up for conversation. But I think today we want to land on some things that it's actually, there are some things that we want to go over. So maybe, Kata, do you want to do your tops?
Yeah, I think for me, interpretation is all about self-determination. It's really people make their own decisions. They share, they say what they want to say. If they're saying something that I don't agree with and I'm interpreting, I have to say it. And they will have to deal with the consequences. They will decide if they fight or not. They will decide how. But I mean, for me, it's any decision that I'm making as an interpreter means that it's probably a decision that I'm taking away from someone else. Am I taking their own self-determination, right? So as a social justice person who believes in self-determination, I don't want to be the person that's actually taking away somebody's voice. So that's one thing that I hold very dear when I'm interpreting. And I also know that people need to have all the information of what's happening in a room, of a conversation, to also be able to make decisions. So if I'm excluding part of that information, how could they make an informed decision, right? So this is also part of self-determination. And it goes back to some of the conversation. If someone says a bad word and I take the liberty to not say it, that means that someone is not hearing the full information in that moment and will not know really how to interact or how to respond, or will have less of the information to be able to respond. So those are kind of like two things that I hold very dear when I interpret.
And I would say that for me, like a lot of folks that I've met who get into interpreting are like, I want to help people. I want to help my community. I want to help other people that pass through these systems that me and my family had to. And I always think like the best way to help is doing the best fucking interpreting that you can. That's the best way to help. It's just like do that best interpreting so that everyone can communicate. The other thing I firmly believe is that we are vessels, we are mediums, we are hearing things, repeating them. All of this comes through our bodies. Llámese secondary trauma, llámese compassion burnout. Like there's a real thing of if you're going to do this for many years, and in the kinds of places where we are interpreting, with refugees, with asylees, with immigrants, with victims of domestic violence, with queer and trans folks, like you have to put into practice some kind of things that are going to help you do this for the long term, because we need you for the long term. And the other thing I would say is that language justice is interpretation and translation. It's also fighting for access. It's also bringing people together, but it's got to go beyond. And I think about how we need to honor all languages, right? It's not a Spanish-English thing. Like language justice is not a Spanish-English thing. It's honoring all languages and all the ways we speak. Remember when we started and we were like, I got Southern slang. I'm a Miami girl. Like I have African-American vernacular English. I have Pocho Spanish. It's honoring all of that. It's naming language loss. It's celebrating language reclamation. And I think that only with that are we going to be able to grow this out of this like Spanish-English binary that it's been in for some years. So I think we need to think more broadly about what language justice means. Boom! Ahí está. Ya. So now I'm blah, blah, blah. So now I want to hear from you. We are going to take I just sent a link. This is your chance to tell CPC what you thought of these trainings. I'm going to ask that you please, por todo, for these last 5 weeks, for anything that I can do, if you will please, it would be super helpful to hear your feedback. And we wanted to give time on today's session, but I think it's better for us to move to the close. But yeah, if you can please, if you have enjoyed any second of these trainings, we ask that you please fill out the evaluation and send it in to us.
All right. So we wanted to take a moment to close and wanted to bring two things. If you could think of something that touched your heart or something that really just filled your heart. And then also kind of like a new learning, more like head. So like something that really just wowed you, or an aha moment or something you learned. If you could type those in the chat box so that we can also all see them. So just take a moment and think of, from these last few weeks, what was something that filled your heart, touched your heart, and then something that really just, wow, aha moment, new learnings. And you can type them on the group chat so we can all see them.
Mm.
Should I be reading them out loud?
Maybe that would be sweet.
So I'm seeing queering the language is a new futurescape in my horizon. Heart, I believe in interpretation because I believe in self-determination. Head, building glossaries for each kick. You want to read some too? Heart, sus caras, my brain, terps introduce themselves and say pronouns.
I can do this one. Heartwarming. Meeting people who are doing this work in so many places is wonderful. And yes, the queering language and learning about the evolving nature of language was eye-opening. Something that really touched my heart was the absolute community that I felt in this space. Even though it was online, I felt connected and heard, which was amazing. Something that I learned was amazing was the resources for queering language and the new vocab around that. That's awesome.
I'm very grateful for providing me a space and being inclusive as a non-Spanish speaker. Often I find myself not having a space within language justice programs because of being a non-Spanish speaker. Thank you for the love. Heart, be a vessel, not an advocate. From the ethics session. Head, practice, practice, practice. Make a dictionary.
Listo. Filled my heart to discuss language justice. I'm currently the only person at my job that speaks a non-English language as a first language, and being here definitely felt good. Learning, ethics, Convo Part 1 definitely allowed me to ground myself in why I want to play this role, oriented around organizing. Heart, so many languages in the space here with us. I learned expansion, contraction, definition, borrowing, relay, buffering.
This was a lovely experience. It was great to hear that it is hard and there is always opportunity for growth, no matter how long you have been doing this. Yes. I hadn't really thought about the importance of the decisions an interpreter makes sometime without noticing or on purpose. Queering language and awesome learning, heartwarming, seeing all the people that are in language justice.
Awesome. So, compas, don't forget Gina's comment above. ¿Dónde estás, Gina's comment above? Does someone else want to read Gina's comment above? Where's Gina's comment above? Honoring loss of honoring loss of language really touched my heart because I have really been struggling with this in the last few weeks. Amen. Alleluia. And Genesis said, corazón, a vessel to honor all languages, including the languages that we are told that we shouldn't, i.e. Pocho Spanish. Head, practice, and vocab. Awesome. Compas, I'm sad. I'm sad. Thank you so much. This has been like so heartwarming. It really has. Like, and it's given me like hope for the South. It's given me hope to know all of you. It's given me hope for conference calls. I'm like, look, they don't have to be like shitty and cold. Like they can be sweet. So I really, really appreciate you all. Please keep your eye open. CPC is going to have their annual 2-day language justice training in North Carolina in June. So please keep your eye open for that. ya saben, follow CPC, the Center for Participatory Change, on Facebook and Instagram. If you're a real language justice nerd and want to nerd out, there's the Se Ve Se Escucha podcast. You can hear Catalina on episode 3 talking about queering language. Yeah, y los quiero mucho. So much love for you all. Thank you so, so much. Besos y abrazos. Oh, now I should, yeah. Besos y abrazos. Bye, compas. Thank you so, so much.
Bye.